Welcome along to the Gary Neville podcast. Gary and I have just watched another thrilling North London derby. Gary, you said before the match this is now your favourite fixture. Didn't disappoint, did it?
No, it never does. And I didn't think it would disappoint today. I was surprised that Arsenal went so far in front so early in the game, half an hour or so in. But at the end, it was breathtaking, and I think even I was getting carried away.
Is it a demonstration of how much Arsenal have matured, the fact that they managed to hold on to a victory that they may not necessarily have done a year ago?
Yeah, I always think when sort of almost like a near miss, that wasn't it? And there's definitely some scar tissue from last season for some of those players. And I think if that third goal would have gone in for Spurs somehow at the end, that would have been difficult to come back from. In fact, I'm not sure they would have come back from it. But the fact that they actually have got through, the fact that they've come out of this game with a win, look at this stage of the season, doesn't matter how you get there, you've got to get there. You've got to make sure that Manchester City go into that game at Nottingham Forest. We don't know what that score's going to be yet, but you have to make sure they have to win. And Arsenal have done that job.
Do you feel some sympathy for Spurs with the way they played and the way they did fight back in the second half?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think... I said part way through the game that from box to box, Spurs do a lot of very good things. They're excellent, in fact. And they were really spirited in the second half, so well done to them for that, because, you know, they were down and out and they're playing against a good team. But I think in the first half, just they got messed around on those corners. You know, I think when Vicario looks back at those sort of corners and he sees Ben White sort of nudging him around, never get nudged around off a player that sort of stood there to annoy you. Get a grip of that straight away. And also I think the other defenders, now it's interesting, when I played, I was the player that used to, nowadays they don't have a man marking that man on the keeper, but I used to mark that man that was on the keeper. So if it was Van der Sar or Schmeichel, I would stand in between Schmeichel and Ben White, and I'd make sure I'd hold Ben White and make sure he can't nudge Vicario as the ball comes in. They don't do that nowadays, they leave them unmarked, but that means your goalkeeper can't be surprised by the block or the late nudge. They know it's coming. So yeah, that I have to say that second one, the one that is it Havertz scores the second one?
The third goal of the match.
Third goal of the match, yeah. Havertz scores it. That's 2 yards out. That's keeper's ball. I've got no sympathy for keepers when the ball's 2 yards out, no matter how much it's swung in. You've just got to get there. It comes from far enough away. So in the first half, I just think Spurs got outdone on those set pieces, and Arsenal have been outstanding at them all season. And then there was the other one where, you know, Ben Davies, he was always going to struggle 1v1 if Saka was running directly at him on a counter-attack. And I think Paul Merson made a very good point at half-time. It's something that I, as a full-back, had to do many times. Sometimes when someone's running at you, your mindset is, I can't take the ball off them. They're going to go past me. They're too good. And they're going to drive me back into the box. So what you've got to do is choose which side you want them to go, make sure they go that way so that the rest of the defenders in the middle and the goalkeeper have got predictability, or some level of predictability. When he let Saka come back in on his left foot, he was in trouble. He was really in trouble because he was near to goal as well. So yeah, they made some mistakes in the first half for those goals. But Spurs had good chances. You know, Romero had 2 headers and Son had the chance. So they had equal chances with Arsenal in the first half. They just weren't as clinical. Arsenal were clinical, and that was the difference between the teams.
They also had that goal ruled out, didn't they, which was so close. Fine margins.
It was, and from one side it looked like it was offside. Then from the other we thought, I'm not sure it is offside. In the end it obviously was. But look, we can get wound up about offsides with VAR, but that's the one I don't get wound up about, because there's a consistency to it, and there is a sort of, if you like, a element of the fact that the point where the ball's kicked and the sort of, if you like, the hairlines they draw on, they're the same every week, and I think that we've just got to go with that. That is a positive intervention in the game, I believe. And VAR was positively used in the second half, where Michael Oliver, for him, I thought made an error. You know, it was a big error for him, because, you know, from up here it looked like Declan Rice had just kicked through Kulusevski. So you imagine if VAR wasn't here. So in some ways VAR has had a good day here today, as much as it's got its challenges, and fans, and even I'm starting to struggle with it at times. Fans hate it. You know, the managers and players are struggling with it a lot. But today it's had a good day here, I think, in how it's been operated. Because I think that offside one in the first half was close, but it's either offside or it's not. You know what I mean? There's no in between there.
The one blemish for Arsenal, or two blemishes, are the 2 goals that they conceded after this proud record of going so long away from home without letting any goals in. And the Raya one in particular, you thought that they'd got that out of their system. That doesn't bode too well, does it, for the 3 remaining games?
Yeah, I mean, look, ordinarily I'd be quite critical of a goalkeeper, but he's just kept 6 clean sheets away from home, and it's a mistake. It was a bad one. It could have been worse. And, like you say, I think that Declan Rice and Raya in that dressing room after will be very relieved. We've all given goals away as defenders, goalkeepers. I've been there. The one thing that gives you a consolation as a defender or a goalkeeper when you give a goal away is if you win the game. They'll still take those mistakes home with them. You'll still be asking yourself tonight, why, what if, I've got away with one. All those things that happen as a football player, but it makes it a lot easier to swallow if you've won the match, and they have won the match. That it happens in football, and I think today, because of how Arsenal have been defensively and the setup and how they defend, I'm going to treat it like that, because I don't think it's a pattern that's occurred over a period of weeks. Where I think sometimes I can be critical is where I see patterns of mistakes, of things that you think, hang on, that's happening too many times. And it's a bloody high bar to be a title-winning goalkeeper. It's a high bar to be a title-winning defender and midfield player, because you can get punished for mistakes like that. But they've got away for it today, thankfully for them, and it allows them to move into the next game. Next week they play Bournemouth, I think, don't they, at lunchtime on Saturday. So it gives them a week to be able to rest and just recover, get themselves right. It's a big win for Arsenal today, because everyone before the game pointed towards this game as being a banana skin. I think Manchester United being the other one.
What about the 2 either side of that, Bournemouth and Everton? Do you think that within the 3 remaining games, those 2 plus United, they've shown already they have the stomach to go through with a 100% record?
Yeah, they've got look, the Old Trafford one. You said it during the game. You never know what's going to happen at Old Trafford, and Old Trafford can be a graveyard for teams. Arsenal, even though we're the way Manchester United are at the moment, you have to regard that as a massive match and a big game, because teams have won at Old Trafford this season that have been in the bottom half of the table, but teams that have been in the top half of the table have gone there and struggled. And Liverpool, famously, in the last month or 2, have lost an FA Cup quarter-final there, and they've drawn in the league. And that was probably the start of Liverpool's downfall in where they end up here now. I say downfall, but where they are in terms of dropping out of the title race and going out of the FA Cup. So you can never underestimate a game at Old Trafford. But I said before, if you look at a collection of matches, it can seem overwhelming, but if you look at each individual match, the form that Arsenal have been in and the defensive stability they've had, I mean, they've conceded 2 goals today, I think, in the best possible way to concede 2 goals. They've not been pulled apart. It's not a structural deficiency. It's not repeated, if you like, team errors of, space in midfield or a certain position. It's an error by a goalkeeper, and Declan Rice has just had a little bit of a moment there by basically not seeing what's coming in and around him, being a bit rash. So I think you can explain those 2 goals away that they've conceded today, but I think they will achieve a 100% record. The one doubt I've got is that Old Trafford game, and it'll all depend for me on how City do in the next week or 2 as well, because if City were to, I don't think City will drop points at Forest, but if they were to, for any reason, Arsenal I think would grow. It's a far better Arsenal team than last season. It's a far better Arsenal team. It's a far bigger mentality. It's a stronger mentality. People will point towards Saliba, and I can as well, and you will. But it's more than that. It's more than that, honestly. There's a focus and discipline and attention to detail out there on the pitch in their defensive work. And 6 clean sheets on the bounce away from home is a hell of an achievement in any season. So, yeah, they had maybe a bit of a wobble, the Villa game, obviously Champions League, but that can happen. They've got back on the bike and they're demonstrating that they've moved forward as a club, they've moved forward as a coaching team, they've moved forward as a group of players, and we're in nowhere near the same position as last season.
Everything that you've just outlined there that's happened with Arsenal, the reverse really has happened with Liverpool. I just wonder what you made of the events in their match at West Ham yesterday, particularly this bizarre spat with a substitute who was about to come on between Salah and Klopp.
Yeah, I mean, unpleasant when you see an amazing manager and an amazing player. I had that at Manchester United a few times. There's only one winner, but the problem is the manager's leaving, so it helps Mo Salah a little bit. I think there might be a bit of a problem if it was to carry on for the rest of the season, but 2 massive personalities and characters. And overall on Liverpool, I'm not sat here thinking that they bottled it. I'm sat here thinking that they were running 100 million miles an hour. I mentioned about 6 to 8 weeks ago, I felt like they were sprinting for their lives to stay in this title race because their performance levels were nowhere near the level of Arsenal and City. You know, you watch them all every single week, and Arsenal were at a really high level. City would get into a really high level, and Liverpool were just, if you felt, just hanging on in there. And I feel like it's just gone over the edge. It's just been too much for them. And the talk of emotion helping you and the sort of Jurgen Klopp farewell, that works, but you've got to get close to the end for that. And in the end, they just haven't been good enough, I think, with Liverpool. It's not a case of, you know, their mentality or anything like that. I think they've just gone as far as they possibly can, and they're just drained. And they've actually achieved the maximum that they can. That's where I'm at with Liverpool. I don't see a sort of a, you know, Arsenal last year were overwhelmed by the situation. I don't think Liverpool are overwhelmed by it. I just think they're not quite at the level. They're nowhere near the level of Arsenal and City in their individual performances and where they've been at. And as for Salah, and for, you know, Salah's been, I was obviously at the Merseyside derby. I've done a lot of Liverpool games recently, and he's not at his level that he's anywhere. And he's been an amazing player, and is an amazing player. But he was massively off it in the Merseyside derby. Not just when, I mean, he didn't touch the ball in the first half. What was noticeable, he was right in front of me, up against Mikalenko. I can't remember him getting the ball. I think we showed that he had about 5-6 touches after 30 odd minutes. He wasn't in the game. They weren't getting him in the game, but Mo Salah usually gets in the game. And then in the second half, when Ashley Young comes on, and Ashley Young goes to left back for Mikalenko, who picked up that knock, you're thinking, right, okay, here we go. He'll fancy this. 1-0 down, Liverpool keeping them in the title race, local derby, and there was nothing from him. So Mo Salah's just hit a brick wall. And again, got to be careful. There's a player out here today called Son that I think hit a brick wall probably about 18 months ago, was it, or so, where he looked like he was gone and he was struggling and he was hit. These players play so much football. They play so consistently, and Salah's been almost ever present for like 6-7 years, it feels like. And there just comes a point whereby you just need a break. And that's all I'm seeing. It's too quick to say this is the end of Mo Salah, because I think we've done that before. He just looks like he's just run marathon after marathon after marathon after marathon in every season. And he's got to a point whereby he's mentally and physically probably just got to a point where he thinks, it's hit me. And you don't even know it sometimes. And the season end is round the corner, and he'll get a break, and he needs that break.
I wonder if Jurgen Klopp is the same, really, because he mentioned energy when he announced his intention to quit. Do you think, in retrospect, he made a mistake in publicly putting a finite time limit on his tenure and should have just waited until the end of the season before announcing he was going?
The only example I've got of it was when Sir Alex Ferguson announced that he was leaving before the end of the season in 2001-2, and it was an unpleasant last 4 or 5 months because it created uncertainty in the club, and there were lots of speculation, and the conversation is never good when it's not about what you're currently doing, and it's about who's coming in and what's going to happen next season. So that has occurred, and then the next time Sir Alex Ferguson retired, he announced it at the end of the season, because he knew it was a mistake first time round, and he knew that basically that conversation was not helping the players, it wasn't helping him, it wasn't helping the fans, it wasn't helping anybody. There's two ways of looking at it. Maybe it was going to leak, maybe they were, I mean, I thought they were announcing it because Liverpool, this sort of quite efficient machine, had already got their next, they wanted to approach their next manager, and that they were going to sort of almost in some ways announce that next manager in some way, but that's not happened. It's almost like they've gone from number 1 to number 2 to number 3. So yeah, look, they've done it for a reason. Sometimes I think the way I don't know Jurgen Klopp by any stretch of the imagination, but when I look at him, he looks like he's a man of integrity. He's a man that I think would find it hard to live a lie. Not a lie, but the idea of withholding information sometimes can be the same as a lie, can't it? When you just withhold something that you know that everyone else. And I don't think Jurgen Klopp would like to live his life like that. I think he'd rather move forward with that sort of, if you like, transparency and honesty, that everyone knows where I'm at. And I think because of his experience and his know-how and his intelligence, he probably thought, no, I can navigate this. And I don't think what's happened with Liverpool in the last few weeks is because Jurgen Klopp has announced earlier in the season. I don't think that at all. I think we can start to come to that. You know, everyone said it was a positive thing. It's the farewell run, and we all know we can go and enjoy ourselves in Dublin and win 4 trophies. So people were using it as a positive angle at one point. Now it's gone slightly wrong in terms of the performances. I would still say at the start of the season, if you just said to me, always measure a team, I think, based on what you thought at the start of a season. And if you just said to me Liverpool win a trophy and they finished third, I'd say that was a bloody good season without a midfield at the start of the year and thinking that they were going to transition from this great team into this new team. So I'm not sat here thinking anything sort of like wholly negative. I'm not even, this idea that Liverpool fans might think that I would mock them. They've had a really good season. And I do think that they've done the very best that they can do. I genuinely believe that. I've watched them a lot, not as much as Liverpool fans, but I've watched them a lot. We've watched them a lot. And I don't get they were hanging on in there for their dear lives to City and Arsenal. They're not at City and Arsenal's level at this moment in time. We know that. Jurgen Klopp knew that at the start of the season. So for them to be where they've been, I think it's been a good thing, I would say. And maybe because they got into that position, you might think, well, they could have got to the end, but it's just dipped a little bit at the end.
Two more quick issues. Another one revolving around a manager. After their defeat at Arsenal, some press talk that Maurizio Pochettino's job might be hanging in the balance. Does that surprise you, given that it was supposed to be a project, that he is working with younger players, that they are maturing? Do you think he deserves more time?
Definitely. I mean, I think he's absolutely the right man to work with young players. We've seen what he did at Southampton, bringing players through, developing them. We saw what he did here with players. And for me, I just think it's interesting because, I mean, he came up with a really good statement, didn't he, the other night after the Arsenal game. When we're bad, we're really bad. I mean, they are shocking when they're bad. But you know something? Their good is good. And you can see where the clear deficiency is, obviously, at both ends of the pitch, particularly at the top end of the pitch. And I actually like Nicholas Jackson. Might be an unpopular opinion on here, but I think that player, I like him. I think he's got a lot to give. He's a young player. And I think that he's not cost stupid money. It's his first full season in the Premier League. He's scored quite a few goals, and he keeps going. And there's a lot to be said for that. And he might not be striker number one, but if he was your striker number 2 or 3 in a squad of 18 to 20, you'd say, oh, yeah, I'll take that. So for me, the performance that Chelsea put in against Manchester City in the Cup semi-final, that was a hell of a performance. That good, really good. And if they'd had a forward that could finish at the other end of the pitch more consistently than Nicholas Jackson, then they would have obviously won the game. And I think that's what Chelsea's owners should be looking at, is performance standards. Yeah, they're not consistent and they're awful when they're awful. But actually, they're good. Looks quite exciting. And you can see something. But they need those 2 or 3 players to glue it together. They need really good, experienced signings. They can't afford to go down the route of 8-year contracts. I was thinking about the 8-year contracts the other day. 8-year contracts, by the way, are bad in many ways. One, because I just don't think they make sense. But they're actually not good for a young player.
What do you think? It removes the incentive for them to do well?
I think, look, I think a young player that's... I mean, I'm not saying the money is big as well. You think you've got an 8-year contract as a young 21, 22-year-old, the club might think they've got security over you. But the young player makes, I'm rich. I genuinely am rich. And for some, that's a problem. It just affects the mindset. And the idea that there's no sort of like, sometimes what's the motivation? Yeah, of course, for yourself, for your family, you hope that's the first motivation, for your teammates and for your manager and doing the right thing. But then you do sometimes after a year or 8 months, you need to, right, I've got to fight for that new contract. I've only got 3 years left, I've only got 2 years left. They've got 7 years left, some of them. So those contracts are mad in every single way. Forget FFP and all that stuff that went on, and forget the fact that, I think that if you make a mistake, you're stuck with them for a long time, and all this other stuff, just for the young player themselves to think that comfort. Now, I say that, I once signed a 7-year deal when I was 24, but I was solid as a rock. I was never, ever at Manchester United. So he'd have got rid of me after 10 minutes. Forget the 7-year contract. He'd have just got rid of me and thrown me out the door. He had control. So I'm saying it against someone who actually signed a long-term contract. I don't know what I was talking about before the 8-year contracts, but they came into my mind. But those 3 players, going back to it, if they can get those right 3 players in at the start of the season, the striker, the centre-back to replace Thiago, and the goalkeeper, I think, as well. Those 3 positions come in, and they've got to deal with the James Chilwell thing, because that's a sort of, if you like, a blow every single season. To have to cope with the idea that you're losing these 2, I don't know how they deal with that, but they've got to deal with it. They've got to be positive about dealing with that. Whether it's, they probably think they've got the support players. Gusto's a good right back, and whether they think Cucurella can do the left back job, but I wouldn't mess with Maurizio Pochettino at all. I think Maurizio Pochettino definitely deserves another transfer window. I think he definitely deserves the idea of completing the jigsaw of the three positions that everyone knows are missing. And I think when he's got those three players in, maybe four, because you might need two strikers, I think at that point then you'd be saying, right, okay, then we'll judge Maurizio Pochettino. I think it's far too early. And the reason I say that is, I think their performance levels at times are very, very good. They hit a good level.
And just finally, we don't know all the teams who are going to drop out of the Premier League yet, but we do know a team coming into it, Leicester securing their promotion. Are you glad to see them back? Do you enjoy your trips to the KP?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the famous season, yeah, it was amazing, and they've bounced straight back up. I think they needed to, and they've done well. They've done it in good style, some good football along the way. And, it's the one league, two leagues. There's two leagues in this country that I've never had exposure to. League Two, I've been stuck in for 5 years, and I sort of watch, every single week. So I know quite a bit about League Two. I know quite a bit about the Premier League, and I know a lot about the non-leagues because I watched hundreds of games for Salford when we were coming through. But League One and the Championship are the games that I just, you can't watch everything, can you? Okay. But everyone says it's the toughest league and it's just a marathon. And so well done to Leicester for getting out of the Championship and back into the Premier League. Sheffield United, we've lost, so sad for them. But yeah, they were never up to it, so at least they've been in here for a year, and we'll see what happens between Burnley, Luton and Nottingham Forest. I'm at Luton. I don't know if you're at Luton on Friday night or not.
No, I'm not there. I'm leaving that one to you.
Yeah, I'm at Luton on Friday night, so it'll be interesting, that one, because they play Everton. Obviously, Everton have got out of it now. They've had a great week. But it'll be interesting. Notts Forest this afternoon against City is interesting. We'll see how that goes, and by the time this comes out, everyone will know the results. But yeah, it'll be interesting the next couple of weeks.
Well, we look forward to following every twist and turn in the relegation battle and the title race. Thanks for joining us, Gary.
Thanks, Rob.